Edward, the blue engine, was having a lovely day. His trains had been as punctual as always, and he was now enjoying a well-deserved drink. But as he sat dozing, he suddenly took note of a row of trucks nearby. They were being shunted away by a small black tank engine. This engine had arrived to help run the yards before Thomas had arrived on the island. Edward hadn't seen them for quite some time. "Hello there," he smiled happily. The little engine froze and grew silent. "I say," began Edward, but before he could say any more, the little engine scurried away. Poor Edward felt very confused. "I didn't know that other engine was still about," he mused to Henry a short while later. "What, that old scruffy tank engine?" murmured Henry. "I hardly noticed them myself. They just disappear into the background. They're not much for conversation either." "Do you not speak with them?" asked Edward. "Never have," sniffed Henry. "I don't think the others have either. But why will we? Just a tank engine after all, but at least it knows its place. A rare thing today considering how obnoxious that Thomas is." Edward shot Henry a look. "Really, Henry, I am ashamed of you. That poor engine must think us all horrid." The guard's whistle blew before Edward could say any more, and he rolled away deep in thought. "What a shame, what a shame," the old engine puffed himself. "And I don't even know their name." For the rest of the day, whenever he was in or around the yard, Edward kept a vigilant eye out for the little engine. "Have you lost something, Edward?" peeped Thomas. "No, I was looking for that other little engine," replied Edward. "What, that odd job engine who never says anything?" laughed Thomas. "Good luck with that. They're so silent it's as if they're invisible engine. You'll sooner find Gordon pulling trucks," he added cheekily, as he hurried away to arrange the train. Edward just sighed. He had hoped to at least find out the engine's name, but to no avail. "Never mind, old boy," comforted his driver. "Remember, there is always one way to find answers." Edward suddenly smiled. "Of course," he cheered, as he puffed happily away. Next day, the little engine had just marshaled some empty coaches into the carriage shed. They were just about to slip away when Edward came puffing up. "Hello again," called Edward. "Please don't be alarmed." The little engine felt ready to run off again, but seeing the look on the old engine's face made it give a pause. "I just wanted to apologize for the other day," explained Edward. "I didn't mean to upset you. I just wanted to say hello." The little engine said nothing, but it made no effort to move, much to Edward's relief. "I do wish," the old engine continued, "to apologize for never having said hello before. You're so quiet that I never quite noticed you were around. I hope you can forgive me, Marklin." The little engine was very surprised. Edward knew its name. "The Fat Controller told me," explained Edward with a chuckle. "Anyways, I'll leave you now." But before Edward could finish, the little engine whistled happily. "Peep, peep, peep." Now it was Edward's turn to be surprised, but his shock quickly gave way to laughter. "I hope this means all is forgiven," he smiled. All was forgiven. From that day on, Edward and Marklin remained good friends. Marklin still doesn't speak, as they are that sort of engine, and I'm sorry to say none of the other engines on the railway paid him any heed. But Marklin doesn't seem to mind. A friend like Edward is all they need. Edward is delighted, and whenever the two engines see each other, Edward is always sure to give a whistle for Marklin, the invisible engine.
If you were to travel along Thomas's branch line, you'd be sure to spot a delightful Maithwaite station, a favorite of many. It's also home to a special member of the branch line family, Sierra the station cat. Sierra was adored by engines and people alike. Everybody loved to see her. Well, that is everyone, except for Thomas. Thomas thought it was all silly. A station's no place for a cat, he said. She's far too close to the railway for it to be safe. They do it at other stations, you know, said Bertie before chuckling. I think you're just jealous that she's getting more attention than you. Thomas scoffed indignantly, but before he could reply, Bertie roared away laughing. As he did, no one seemed to notice two figures slipping quietly into one of Clarabelle's compartments. Thomas made good time and arrived early at the junction, but he was too busy brooding over Bertie's comment to realize. When James arrived with his connecting train, Thomas thought he was late. "What time do you call this?" he snapped. James was taken aback. "What do you mean? I'm on time." "Nonsense. I've been waiting here for ages," retorted Thomas. "You just don't know how to manage trains." James glared crossly and snapped back at the tank engine. But as the two argued, they failed to notice a scene unfolding on the platform. The two mysterious figures were slowly leaving Clarabelle when the guard appeared suddenly. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said sternly, "but might I see your tickets, please?" The two men panicked and tried to run. The guard was able to grab one, but the other slipped away. Luckily, he didn't get far, as colliding with a nearby porter foiled his escape plans. By now, the two engines stopped arguing and noticed the commotion. "What's happening?" asked Thomas. "These gentlemen thought they could ride our train without paying," explained the guard. "They must have slipped on at Maithwaite, I reckon." James then burst out laughing. "Dear, oh dear, little Thomas. Far dodges. My. It looks like you don't know how to manage trains." Thomas went red in the face as James departed, still laughing heartily. That night, Thomas was still brooding about the entire ordeal. "It's that silly cat's fault," grumbled Thomas. "Come on, Thomas. I don't think that's quite the case," said Toby, but Thomas wouldn't have it. "If people didn't fuss about her, they might have noticed what had happened." Toby knew Thomas was the one to forget logic when he was fed up, so he decided to go to sleep instead. Left with no one to grumble to, Thomas eventually retired to sleep himself. But when he awoke the next morning, he felt no better. Dark clouds loomed above in the skies, threatening to rain, which didn't help his mood. As he slunk out of the sheds, the rain started falling. It rained hard, but only in a short burst. By the time Thomas had reached Maithwaite, it had stopped again. The threat still loomed, however, and no one wanted to take a chance. Passengers ducked in and out of the coaches as Thomas sat bored. Annie and Clarabelle thought it was a good thing Sierra wasn't in his sight. As the train waited, the guard went to the station to speak with the station master. He had barely gone when Thomas's fireman looked back along the platform. "Hang about," he called. "Something must be up," he told the driver. The driver looked too. There, besides Clarabelle's guard's compartment, stood Sierra, hissing at something inside the coach. The fireman decided to investigate. There, standing amongst the luggage of the passengers, stood a very startled man who clearly didn't belong there. The fireman acted quickly and brought the man out as the guard returned. "What's happening?" the guard asked. "I think someone's trying to nick from our train," explained the fireman. The driver and the station master quickly joined him, but Thomas was confused. He couldn't see what was happening. "What's going on?" he called. "Someone tried to steal some luggage from our train," his driver told him. "We'd have gone away with it, if not for someone's help." Thomas was relieved, but confused. Whose help? His driver stepped before him with Sierra in his arms. Thomas was surprised. "Sierra? Sierra saved the day?" "Yes, indeed," laughed his crew. Thomas's face lit up with a smile. "My, what a wonderful cat," he said. His crew laughed again, as Sierra just purred. Nowadays, Thomas isn't upside to her anymore. Quite the opposite. He thinks she's wonderful. In return, Sierra took a shine to him too, and sometimes comes and noses around inside his cab. Thomas feels very honored, and now insists that he's the biggest fan of Sierra, the Maithwaite Station cat. When Skarloey went away to be mended, Sir Handel and Peter Sam ran the line together. The engines would often see people waving to them as they puffed their way along the line. However, some of these people would stare into little black boxes instead of waving hello. Peter Sam thought it most peculiar. "Those are cameras. They are used to take photographs," explained his driver. Peter Sam was impressed, although he still didn't quite understand it all. "I would like to take photographs," he would puff. "What fun that would be." "Rubbish," snorted Henry. "How would you take a photograph? You can't hold a camera," he added rudely. Peter Sam didn't care. "You're just an old fuddy-duddy," he teased as he ambled away, still chuckling to himself. "I would like to take photographs. I would like to take photographs." He spent the rest of the day talking of nothing else. Even being on goods work didn't matter to him as he ambled up to the quarry with some empty trucks. As he made his way along the line, he spotted some photographers near the viaduct. He gave a happy peep 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 as he puffed past them. "What fun it is, what fun it is," he sang as he carried along his way. Soon Peter Sam was heading back down the line with his loaded wagons rumbling behind. The little engine's chimney was still in the clouds, but the water in his tanks was beginning to sink. "We better stop for a drink," called the driver as they neared a station. They quickly drew to a stop, and Peter Sam was soon enjoying a refreshing drink. But as he stood waiting, he suddenly noticed something. "Oh dear!" he cried. "Somebody's left their camera behind." Someone certainly had, for one laid abandoned on the station bench. "It must belong to one of those chaps we saw by the viaduct," murmured the driver. "We best return it quickly," peeped Peter Sam. "But Sir Handel will already be heading back down with the evening train," called the fireman. "They'll surely be on board." "If we were to hurry, we could make it before they leave on the big railway," suggested Peter Sam. "We could at least try anyways, as we are the last train." "Well, I suppose we could," shrugged the driver. Peter Sam was very pleased, and watched as the guard took the camera on board his van before they finally started off again. Poor Peter Sam wanted to go his fastest, but his driver wouldn't let him. "It's not an emergency," he reminded him. Peter Sam knew it wasn't, but he felt determined all the same, and he continued to bustle along with his trucks rattling behind him. At last, the end of the line came into view. Peter Sam shot under the road bridge and scampered along the wharf towards the station. The passengers, Henry, and Sir Handel all stared in bewilderment as the little engine came to a stop. "What's all the fuss about?" grunted Sir Handel. Poor Peter Sam didn't have the breath to reply, but thankfully, the guard appeared with the missing camera in hand. A small scout man let out a happy cry. "Oh, thank goodness! I thought I lost it for good." He gave Peter Sam, his crew, and the guard his utmost thanks before he hurried aboard Henry's train. Peter Sam rode slowly away, proud with his day's work. Though he seemed less proud the next morning when the thin controller came to see him. "Whilst I'm far from happy to hear about an engine racing about at silly speeds, I am pleased that a quite distinguished gentleman has showered our little line in praise, he said. So perhaps with the understanding that such brisk runs are not to be repeated, we can let this discretion be. Peter Sam heartily agreed and remained as good as his word. But between you and me, Sir Handel quite wishes he'd been told not to mention photography anymore instead. His adventure meant it was quite some time before Peter Sam fell silent on the subject. After helping to rescue Toby and proving her worth, Mavis had been allowed to travel down the tramway to Farquhar Station. Finally free of the quarry fines, Mavis slowly became a more common sight at the station and the yard. And she made more friends too. She already knew Toby, of course, and soon became more acquainted with Thomas and Percy. But of all the engines, Mavis wanted to get to know Daisy since they had only met once before. It's nice to see another diesel, she bubbled excitedly. Daisy was glad to see Mavis too, of course, but seeing Mavis always meant seeing trucks too. Daisy wasn't at all keen of trucks, especially dirty ones, and so liked to keep well clear of them. She never seems to have the time to stop and say hello, thought Mavis to herself. Perhaps if I show her how expertly I can handle trucks, she'd be impressed. When she next saw Daisy at the station, Mavis tooted gaily at her. "Hello, Daisy. Lovely day." "Yes, indeed, dear," replied Daisy. "Wonderful day to have one's paintwork shine." Mavis smiled cheerfully as she began shunting the trucks around the yard. She moved some empty trucks out of the sidings towards the station where Daisy stood. Daisy felt this was close enough for the trucks. "Anyway, can't stay for idle chatter. One must keep up the timetable, you know." "Goodbye, dear," called Daisy, and she flounced away before Mavis could get another word in. "Fiddlesticks," muttered Mavis. Her plan had failed. Defeated, she returned slowly to the quarry with her empties, determined to think of another way to impress Daisy. But however much she thought, she couldn't think of a way how. A few days later, Daisy rode into the top station with her midday train. She was feeling pleased with herself, but as the passengers disembarked, the station master walked up to her. "Percy's not feeling well," he explained. "Thomas will cover his trains, but his trucks still need to be shunted away." "So get Toby to do it," murmured Daisy. "He's not here at the moment." "You are. They need sorting immediately." "Me? Me? I can't shunt trucks." "You can," came a blunt reply. "Shunting a few away won't do you any harm." Daisy was cross, but she knew protesting would be fatal. She slipped away as quickly as she could. If she had to shunt trucks, then she'd make fast work of it. She was coupled up and pushed them towards the sidings, muttering all the while. The trucks knew she wasn't experienced. "Let's have some fun," they whispered in their silly way. Daisy was too preoccupied to notice. They were nearing the end of the siding when the trucks launched forward. On, they cried. Daisy was terrified. "Help!" With a loud bump, the trucks banged into the buffers. They hadn't been moving fast enough to cause any damage, but the trucks didn't care. They knew they had rattled Daisy. Poor Daisy was so taken aback, she screwed her eyes shut tight. "Is everything all right?" Daisy opened her eyes. There, coming towards the yard, was Mavis. Daisy thought she was the most wonderful sight. "Oh, Mavis, save me from these wretched things," she cried. Mavis quickly took control. As Daisy scuttled back to the station, she saw Mavis shunt the trucks into place. Daisy was very thankful and showered Mavis in praise. From then on, the two Daisies became good friends. They get on very well and talk whenever they can. Mavis is very glad of this. Daisy is happy too, especially when Mavis is there to keep the trucks away from her. One late afternoon, as Gordon rode into the big station, he found the Fat Controller waiting for him. "You've been working very hard with the Express recently," the controller smiled, "but I understand how tiring it can be for you. Would you like to have a few days of doing some more peaceful work?" "Yes, please, sir," replied Gordon thankfully. He was very relieved. The recent holiday season had kept him very busy. "Excellent. Starting tomorrow, James will cover for you on the Express, and you can pull some local trains." The Fat Controller tipped his hat and walked away. Gordon smiled happily before getting ready for his last train of the day. The next morning, Gordon woke up to his fireman arriving to start the day. "Morning, lad," said his fireman. "Alan's taken ill, I'm afraid, so I'll be working with a relief driver for a while." "What a shame," sighed Gordon. "I do hope he recovers soon." The fireman agreed. He began to ready Gordon for the coming day's work as they waited for the relief to arrive. When the relief finally arrived, it was almost time to leave. "You're late, mate," said the fireman. "You've got to be on time." The relief just scoffed as he lit a cigarette. He was an old engine driver who thought he knew everything. He didn't like being spoken down to. "I know how to do my job, thank you," he snapped. Without another word, he climbed into the cab. The fireman quickly followed, and Gordon soon jerked out of the sheds towards the station. He backed down onto the coaches with a bump. "Oh, oh, oh!" cried the coaches. "Be careful!" grumbled Gordon. "I don't take orders from my engines either," grunted the relief. "I'm the driver here, not either of you. Now shut up and know your place." The guard's whistle blew, and the train started away, jerking roughly into motion again. Gordon and his fireman knew the peaceful day's work they were looking forward to were going to be anything but peaceful. For the rest of the day, the relief continued to be a nuisance. He would control Gordon recklessly, snap at the fireman for any odd reason, and in Gordon's opinion, he seems more interested in his cigarettes than the engine he was driving. It all came down later that afternoon. As they arrived at the junction, the driver drew the train to an abrupt halt, just avoiding having the first coach overshot the platform. Thomas, who was waiting with his coaches, burst out laughing. "Dear, oh dear, Gordon. Forgot to stop? You must be getting old." He puffed away laughing, leaving Gordon fuming. He had had enough. "For goodness sake, pay attention to what you're doing," he yelled at the relief. "You'll cause an accident if you don't." The relief went red in the face. "Don't you dare talk to me like that!" The fireman tried to intervene, but thankfully, the guard's whistle blew. The train jerkfully out of the station. Both Gordon and the relief were left brooding in silence. They soon neared the big station. Gordon was thankful his day's work was nearly over. But as he drew closer to the station, he realized he wasn't slowing down. The relief was so busy complaining to himself, he wasn't paying attention to where they were. "Good glory! Stop! Stop!" Gordon cried in alarm. The relief suddenly realized where they were. He threw the brakes on hard, but it was too late. Gordon whistled frantically to clear the platform before he shut his eyes. Luckily, Gordon's warning had worked. Everyone had cleared the platform before the crash, and none of the passengers had been injured. But poor Gordon felt very uncomfortable. Once the mess had been sorted, Gordon was taken straight to the works. The Fat Controller came to see him that evening. I'm sorry, sir, started Gordon, but the Fat Controller held up his hand. Don't worry, Gordon. I know it wasn't your fault. Your fireman has filled me in all about this relief you had. You'll be glad to know that he has already been put in his resignation. Gordon was glad. I'm sorry your days of rest turned out this way, the Fat Controller continued, but once you are mended, I take it you would like to return to the Express. Yes, please, sir, said Gordon, and so it was arranged. Once he returned, Gordon was reunited with both the Express and his driver, much to his relief.
Sir Handel was cross. Me, of all engines, downgraded to maintenance duties. What shambles! The other engines just rolled their eyes. Sir Handel had been complaining all evening. Just where is that Rusty? Sir Handel continued. This is their work, not mine. Rusty is in the workshop, chuckled Peter Sam. Maintenance engines need to be maintained too. Sir Handel just groaned. Then why, out of all engines, is it me who has taken over such simple work? Maybe it's because you've been late 6 times this week, muttered Skarloey. Sir Handel was indignant. My dear Skarloey, every engine has a late train once in a while, even ones as grand as me. Yes, but not even Wednesday, Peter Sam added quietly. Sir Handel went red in the face and wisely decided to go to sleep. But the next morning, his temper was no better. As he set off up the line with Mr. Hugh and the workmen, he grumbled dreadfully. It's not right. It's not right. I never get treated fairly. Never! Mr. Hugh and the workmen just ignored him, so Sir Handel eventually subsided into a silent sulk. Their first order of the day was a rough rail joint inside the passing loop. The workers quickly set to work as Sir Handel watched on, bored. He was just about to start complaining again when Peter Sam came puffing past with a passenger train. Good morning, Rusty, he whistled gaily as he passed. The coaches giggled too, leaving Sir Handel seething in a silent rage. By midday, the maintenance train had reached the top station, where they found Skarloey waiting. So, how's the work? Skarloey smiled. Sir Handel just glared. Infuriating! How does Rusty cope with all the stopping and starting? Not to mention the waiting around! It's enough to drive an engine mad! Oh, is it now? Murmured Skarloey. I thought you said it was simple work. Surely it can't be that bad. It's beneath me, that's what it is, scoffed Sir Handel. I should be pulling coaches. I would hope not, called Mr. Hugh. Not with all the rough riding you've been doing. It's as if you're trying to make extra work for us. Sir Handel's response was mercifully drowned by the departure of Skarloey, who was laughing as he left. The afternoon's work was mending the line which led towards the quarry. Sir Handel had to sit and wait with the trucks until he was told to move. If he was impatient before, he was even worse now. And this time, being ignored by all around only seemed to fuel his complaining. Everyone was glad when it was time to head home, Sir Handel most of all. He hurried down the line so quickly, his crew found him hard to handle. Ease up, lad, they cried. You'll knock us out of the cab at this rate. But their efforts were fruitless. Sir Handel was determined to be quick. Soon be home, he puffed steadily to himself. He made decent progress, but didn't quite make it. They were travelling as fast as was allowed when they reached the loop. As they rolled over the section they had mended that morning, Sir Handel's front wheels left the rails completely. Ah! He cried, "Stop!" When he did, all four of his driving wheels stood atop the sleepers. "Ah, that's torn it," groaned the driver. Sir Handel felt very foolish and sat quietly in shame as the workers began trying to re-rail him. He felt even worse when Peter Sam arrived to help pull him back on the rails before finally helping him home. The other engines were waiting in the sheds when Sir Handel was pushed into place. They all looked ready to tease him, but before anyone could speak, the Thing Controller arrived. "You are a very troublesome engine," he snapped. "Until I can trust you to pull regular trains again, you can continue doing Rusty's work, even after they return to service. I'm sure that will teach you how to be a sensible engine," he finished pointedly. Sir Handel said nothing. He just looked glumly down at his buffers, even after the Thing Controller walked away. He remained unusually silent for the rest of the evening. I can only hope that he has learned to be more sensible. Don't you?
Mike was shunting in the yard. Unsurprisingly, he grumbled dreadfully about it. "It's not fair. This is a job for one of those diesels," he muttered bitterly. "I should be pulling trains." "It couldn't possibly have anything to do with the ballast trucks you derailed yesterday," chortled Rex. "Manager said something about learning to shunt properly, I believe." Mike wheezed indignantly at Rex. "Why, you..." Rex just laughed as he puffed away with his train, leaving Mike to stew in his bitterness. Unfortunately for the little engine, his day was about to get worse. Workers were repaving the car park beside the miniature railway, and with them came George the Steamroller. When George arrived, he scoffed at the little railway. "I thought those little engines in the hills were small enough," he bemoaned. "But these toys? Waste of space, this lot. Should rip the whole lot up and lay some lovely tarmac instead." Mike overheard this and was furious. "We're not toys. We're more useful than you could ever hope to be." George remained unmoved. "Bah, you lot aren't good for anything. Better off without ya. Railways are no good," he finished in his usual way. "Rip 'em up, turn them into roads." By now, Mike was seeing red. He yelled a colorful retort, but, perhaps mercifully, George made so much noise rolling away, Mike's words were drowned out. "I'd like to show that ugly thing what for," Mike grumbled to himself, but he wasn't entirely sure what for was. He spent the rest of the morning banging about his shunting, as George grumbled about his own work. They were both in full temper, but for one, trouble loomed ahead. As the clock struck the hour, the men stopped work for lunch. George lumbered away to have a rest, still grumbling as he went. "Stupid engine, stupid railway," he growled. He was so busy grumbling that he wasn't paying attention to his surroundings. "Watch out, lad!" cried his driver. George snapped out of his thoughts, but by then, it was too late. Some signs warning of the construction light in the steamroller's path. George tried to swerve out of the way, but he was too late. With a crunch, one of the signs disappeared beneath his roller. "Whoops," stammered George quietly. The foreman strolled over, very cross. "You stupid great thing," he shouted. "I'll be speaking to your owner about this." George felt rather foolish. Worse still is that Mike appeared nearby, shunting some flatbeds. When he saw the scene, he laughed. "Would you look at that?" he cheered. "No good to anyone, that's what you are." Mike was so engrossed in George's mishap, he failed to spot something crucial. The points were set against him. The flatbeds hit the points and bounced off the rails. Mike came to an unglorified stop, feebly letting off steam. "Oh dear," he cried. George, who was still being scolded, didn't notice the accident, so Mike was spared insults as he set about helping clear the mess. But that didn't stop the smoke controller from having stern words with him. "Perhaps a few days in the sheds will teach you some sense," he said pointedly. Both Mike and George felt foolish, and they remained uncharacteristically silent for the rest of the day.
Summer had arrived on the island, but Oliver, the Great Western Engine, was feeling far from sunny. "What's the matter?" asked Duck one morning. "You don't seem yourself today." "Every day's beginning to feel the same," sighed Oliver. "I'd just like something interesting to happen for a change." "I know how you feel," replied Duck, "although I'm more partial to a nice peaceful day with the coaches." "Cheer up, I'm sure something exciting will happen soon," he added cheerfully. Oliver remained doubtful, and for the rest of the morning he puffed along feeling dreadfully bored. But as he rolled into the big station, he heard a commotion ringing out from the sidings. Some points had jammed, leaving poor Douglas trapped in a siding. "Typical," Douglas grumbled. "Now what'll I do about my train?" "Excuse me," called Oliver from the platform. "Could I be of any help? I've plenty of time before my next train." The station master was very pleased, and they hurried away to make the arrangements. It wasn't long before Oliver was coupled to Douglas's train. "At last, something interesting," cheered Oliver. Duck was right after all. Just then, the guard's whistle blew, and with a cheerful whistle of his own, Oliver rolled away. The train was soon trundling steadily along, with a cheerful Oliver in front. "At last, a change!" he puffed to himself. "Nothing could spoil today." But as they ambled along, Oliver suddenly noticed something up ahead. A small canal ran for a short way beside the railway. Some days it was full of boats, but that day there was only one, and its owners stood on the embankment looking concerned. "Something must be the matter," called the driver as Oliver drew to a halt, much to the relief of the boat's owners. "Thank goodness you've stopped," they said. "We've had an accident. Lost control, you see, and now the front of our boat's stuck in the bank. Please, can you send for help?" The driver agreed, but Oliver thought otherwise. "We needn't go for help. Seeing as we've stopped, I could help pull your boat free." "Are you sure you can manage?" asked the driver. "I know horses used to pull canal boats before." "But you're no horse. It's worth a try at least," replied Oliver. With that, everyone set to work. Ropes were quickly tied between the tank engine and the stricken boat. And soon the driver gave the signal. 1, 2, 3, pull! It was hard work at first, harder than Oliver had anticipated. But he didn't give up, and at last he pulled the boat free. "Thank you very much," called the boat owners. Oliver felt proud, but he still had his trucks to deliver, so he puffed quickly away to make up the lost time. When at last he returned to the station, he found the Fat Controller waiting for him. "Well, Oliver, I'm proud of you for your work today. You've certainly proved how useful my engines can be." Oliver was very pleased. "Thank you, sir," he whistled happily. He remained in high spirits for the rest of the day. So, laughed Duck that evening, how did you enjoy your day working as a horse? Oh, it was a welcome change for sure, chuckled Oliver. But after all that excitement, I think a nice peaceful day with my coaches is just what I need.
Salty is a dockyard diesel and a friend to all. He works happily at the docks, pushing and pulling trucks into place. "Morning, Miati," he called one morning to Derek. "Good morning, Salty," smiled Derek. "Have you heard the news?" "What news?" asked Salty. "They say there'll be a thick fog rolling in this afternoon," said Derek. Cranky the crane scoffed. "This is the sea. There's always fog. That's hardly news." Salty looked sternly at the crane. "Now that ain't no way to speak to someone sharing news," added Salty with a smile. "So thank you for telling me, Miati." Derek felt happier, and exchanging toots of their horns, the diesels set off happily back to work. Later that afternoon, the fog arrived. It hung heavily in the air and made everything hard to see. But Salty didn't care. He carried about his shunting, singing merrily as he went. Derek, however, wasn't feeling so merry as he rolled into the harbour. "Something the matter, matey?" called Salty. "Fog not bothering you, is it?" "No, I feel ever so thirsty," wheezed Derek. "Couldn't fill up at the last station. I've only just made it here." "Well, you've made it, and that's all that matters," smiled Salty. "You go fill up, Miati. I'll have those trucks away." Derek was very thankful and rolled happily away to refuel, but his troubles weren't over. After Derek rolled into the siding, Salty passed with his trucks. When Derek was ready to move again, he waited for the points to be set back in his favour. But nothing happened. "The points have jammed!" came a cry from the signalman. Derek was upset. "But what about my next train?" "They'll have to find someone else," replied the driver. But there wasn't anyone else nearby. "Whatever shall we do?" fretted Derek. Salty tried to comfort the diesel. "Don't you worry. They'll have someone here soon." Derek still looked worried. "But it'll be late. Oh, the fat controller won't be happy with that." "Then why doesn't Salty take it?" snapped Cranky, who was fed up with Derek's worrying. "He's already here." The two diesels sat in surprised silence. "Could you do it?" asked Derek at last. "It's only a small train." But Salty looked nervous. Well, I'm a dockyard diesel, you see. I don't really go inland, and "Oh, please," said Derek. "Could you try?" Salty still felt nervous, but he didn't want to let Derek down. "All right, matey. Just this once. I'll give it a try." That made Derek very happy. Salty had arranged the train and backed carefully down on it. He waited for the guard's whistle. "Don't worry," called Derek. "The fog isn't as bad as it seems. You shouldn't have any trouble as you go." I hope not," murmured Salty to himself. But before he could say anything else, the guard's whistle blew. "I'll be back soon," he called as he rumbled away. A short ways from the harbour, the fog was causing trouble. A farmer was hurrying along in their lorry, trying desperately to see where they were going. "Hope we make it back," they grumbled as they peered ahead. The road was barely visible, even to the poor lorry. Its headlights shone brightly, trying to cut through the fog, but it was little use. Suddenly, The headlights cut out altogether. "Oh, horrors!" cried both farmer and lorry as they swerved off the road and bounced down an embankment. Salty was travelling carefully along. He had hardly left the harbour, but already seemed to miss it. "I'll be back soon, I will," he thought to himself. Suddenly, he saw something heading straight towards him. "Look out!" cried Salty. He drew to a quick stop as the poor farm lorry came to an awkward stop right beside the line. "Well, shiver me timbers!" gasped Salty. "Is everyone all right?" But the farmer wasn't all right. "I think I've broken my arm," he called. "We'll send for help at the next signal box," called Salty's driver. "They'll have an ambulance here for you soon." But just then, Salty spoke up. "Excuse me, but should we take them back to the harbour? It'll be easier for the ambulance to reach them. There should be room in our guard's van." The driver was impressed. "Excellent thinking, lad." The guard was sent back to the signal box as Salty's driver helped the farmer into the brake van. "Don't worry, shipmate," Salty called to the poor lorry. "We won't go forgetting you either." The lorry hoped so. The guard had returned, and it watched Salty roll back the way he had come. Derek and Cranky were surprised to see Salty back so soon. "I didn't think so soon would be that soon," murmured Derek. Cranky's comments were much harsher. "You daft diesel! You're not supposed to bring the trucks back!" Cranky was cut off by the sudden sound of a siren. The diesel and crane watched in shock as an ambulance rolled into view. Paramedics quickly helped the injured farmer into the ambulance, and it quickly set off again. Salty watched it until it was out of sight. "Now, we really best get these trucks going," he said with a chuckle. With a toot of his horn, he rolled away again, leaving Derek and Cranky in a stunned silence. The rest of Salty's journey passed without note, and by that night Salty was back at the docks. When he returned, he found the dockmaster waiting for him. "Salty, you've done a marvellous job today," he congratulated. "I am very pleased with you. The farmer's now recovering well, thanks to you." Salty smiled happily. It was nothing really, Captain. Can't go leaving crewmates in danger now." "You've been a credit to our harbour," finished the dockmaster. "You deserve a reward." "Well, there is one thing, Captain," said Salty quietly. "What's that?" Salty grinned broadly. "See that we get those jammed points ship-shape."
Gordon had been sent to the works for repairs. While he was away, the Fat Controller put James in charge of Gordon's express duties. James loved pulling the express, and I'm sorry to say that he started to become very boastful about it. "Just wait until you see me flash by. That is, if you can even see me. I'll probably just be a blur." The other engines rolled their eyes, all except for Emily. "Why did the Fat Controller pick you? Burko and I could have done it easily, and we wouldn't have been boasting about it for hours." "What, you? Pull the express? Ha! I'd like to see you try. You stick with your local services, Emily, and leave the big trains to us big engines." "Ah yes, big engines like you, James, who always needs to be pushed up the hill." James pretended he hadn't heard and slunk away. The other engines laughed, except for Emily, who was still upset. "It's just not fair." Emily longed to pull the express herself. Edward tried to comfort her, but his words fell on deaf ears. Emily rolled slowly away, still feeling down. Emily arrived at the station, but to her surprise, she found an inspector waiting for her. A special train has been ordered. I'd like you to pull it, please, Emily. Run along quickly now and fetch some coaches. Yes, sir. Emily rolled away to the carriage shed. As she went, James passed with the express. Look at me now! Emily was jealous and wasn't paying attention to her surroundings. Oh, hello, dear. Emily jumped. Who was that? She turned and saw old Slow Coach standing at the back of the carriage shed. Oh my, I'm sorry I startled you. It's only me. What are you doing at the back? Oh, I'm just waiting until I'm needed. Though that may be some time, considering how long ago my last train was. Well, I've got a train to take now. Would you like to come along? Oh, yes, please. So Emily was quickly coupled and took Coach to the platform. And when the guard's whistle blew, Emily steamed away. Soon she was steaming through the countryside. Coach was very happy to be out again, and she sang happily as they rolled along. But Emily still felt down. Is everything all right, Emily? Oh yes, I suppose so. It's just that I just wish I could pull the express. To be able to fly along and to have everyone watch me flash past. It's always such a sight whenever I see the express pass me. I can agree with you there, though I wouldn't quite fancy it myself. I feel like if I went that fast, my poor old wheels might come off. Call me old-fashioned, but I prefer to go at a much slower pace. But what's so special about going at that same old slow speed? Coach paused for a moment, and then became excited. Why, just look over there! Some children were running to the nearby fence to watch Emily pass. They waved excitedly as she neared, and were even happier when Emily whistled hello. That's what's nice about going slow. You really get the time to see and enjoy everything. Everyone can still see you go by, but you're able to see them too. Emily thought about what Coach had said, and looked around her, taking in the beautiful scenery all around. Oh, you're quite right, dear. I've been a silly engine. It's much nicer being able to take everything in properly. Old Slow Coach smiled warmly. I'm just glad you've cheered up. It's such a shame to be sad on such a nice day. Emily smiled warmly, and the two happily carried on enjoying everything as they went. At last they reached the workstation. James was just arriving with the return express train. Cool, what's this? I've heard of slow trains, but this is something else. But Emily didn't care about what James had said. Old Slow Coach has shown me what wonders you can see when you go slow. You should try it sometime. Pah! What nonsense! But before James could reply, his guard walked angrily towards him. Just you mind it with your reckless speed. I've had 4 passengers complain already about the ride, and all your rocking about nearly knocked me off my feet. James went red in the face. Emily and Old Slow Coach couldn't help but laugh as James tried to disappear in a cloud of steam.
There was great excitement around the island. For the first time in history, man had set foot on the moon, leading the subject of space to captivate the railway. The engines found it very exciting. Just imagine being up there in space, they said. What a thing that would be. Murdoch, however, seemed rather uninterested in the subject. I don't quite see the appeal myself, he said. Whilst I imagine it's nice and quiet up there, space is hardly a place for an engine. You're just boring, laughed Henry. Murdoch chuckled too. You lot are more than welcome to it. I'll stay here and work whilst you fly away in your rockets. However, amid the rapid space chatter, Quiet whispers began to echo around the yards among the trucks. But trucks are prone to spreading silly gossip, so nobody took any notice. It wasn't until the coaches began joining in the gossip that everyone started to listen. "We've seen spaceships!" they cried.
"What a load of nonsense!" Gordon snorted. "Spaceships? Really? Whatever next?"
"Something has to be up," insisted James. "I just know it."
I could have sworn I clocked something strange the other night," added Donald quietly. "Could have been my imagination, of course. But it also could have been aliens," quivered Bear.
Gordon rolled his eyes.
"This is the sort of nonsense I'd expect Thomas or Percy to spout, not sensible mainline engines."
"It's not nonsense," protested James. "There's aliens about." Most of the engines were in agreement, except for Murdoch.
"It's just this silly little space craze," he whispered to Gordon. "They'll move on soon. Just a bit of excitement is all." Well, I'm glad there's at least one engine who can see sense instead of stars," huffed Gordon as Murdoch puffed away to collect his next train. He found Duck arranging his trucks, but to his surprise, the poor engine looked very pale. "Goodness me," worried Murdoch. "You look as if you've seen a ghost."
Duck sighed. "Oh, no, not a ghost. Oh, never mind. You just think I'm silly."
"Not at all. I know you, Duck. You're one of the most sensible engines I know. Whatever's upset you must be important."
Duck gave Murdoch a sad look, before he gave a weary sigh. "It's these whispers of spaceships. I thought it was all silly rumours myself. Until last night, that is." He paused dramatically. "I was helping tidy the yard last night, just after the night express left. As I was working, I suddenly saw these strange lights high in the sky. I'd hardly enough time to see them before they vanished out of thin air. I thought maybe it was Harold the helicopter, but Percy told me he'd been helping with the postal work, so it couldn't have been him. Besides, he'd never fly so recklessly as to just vanish. I'm sure I saw those lights, Murdoch. It couldn't have been a trick. The truck saw them too. It must have been a spaceship." Poor Murdoch didn't know what to think. He trusted Duck's judgment and could see how rattled the tank engine was. Although he didn't want to, Murdoch found himself beginning to believe the rumours too. For the next few days, the subject of alien spaceships remained the talk of the main line. Some remained skeptical, but most of the engines remained certain, and they would speak in hushed whispers whenever they met at stations. Those who ran night services were especially paranoid. Bear became so nervous that Boko, who didn't believe the rumours, had to take over the midnight goods. One evening, a few weeks after the initial sightings, Boko didn't feel well. Bear was at the other end of the main line, so Murdoch found himself assigned to the midnight goods.
"Oh dear," he puffed to himself as he waited to depart. "I hope we don't see anything strange tonight."
"Good luck, Murdoch!" called Duck. "Do stay safe and alert!" Murdoch was too anxious to reply. As the guard's whistle cut through the still air, the big engine puffed slowly and nervously away out of the yards and onto the main line beyond. The train started off well, but both Murdoch and his trucks felt uneasy. The night sky loomed over them, seemingly intimidating them from above.
Come on, puffed Murdoch to himself. "I'd like to get this done quickly before anything strange happens."
His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the trucks.
"Oh! Look!"
Murdoch's eyes shot to the skies. Two lights shone high above the train before they suddenly vanished from sight. They had actually been obscured by a cloud,
But neither Murdoch or his trucks realized this. "Oh my, it's a spaceship!" cried Murdoch as the trucks shouted and screamed behind him. They bumped about in panic, so roughly there was a sudden crack. Murdoch's fireman looked back. "Whoa, boy, steady on! One of the van doors has come open! We've got to stop and secure it!" Murdoch didn't want to stop, but he knew he had to. The driver applied the brakes and the train began to slow. Murdoch was relieved to see the junction up ahead. "This'll be a safe place to stop," he sighed as the train drew to a stop at the platform. "Hello there!" Murdoch jumped. In all the commotion, he had failed to spot Percy waiting at the platform with the mail train. "Oh, you startled me," he said. "You do look spooked," chuckled Percy. "Whatever is the matter?" Murdoch stammered. "Oh, well, you see, I had to stop. A van door came open. Trucks got a little rattled. Thought we saw a spaceship and..." "A spaceship?" laughed Percy. "What makes you think you saw a spaceship?" "Perhaps it was me," called a voice, as there, out of the night sky, came Harold hovering down. Murdoch was surprised. "Harold? What are you doing here?" "I've brought Percy's post," the helicopter smiled. "I've not come to abduct anyone." "So, why are you worried about spaceships?" teased Percy. Murdoch blushed brightly before he quickly explained about the mainline phenomenon. When he finished, Percy laughed, but Harold looked stern. "Oh, botheration," he sighed. "I knew this would happen. There's been a new plane at my airfield. Its owner likes to take it out for flights when it's dark, says they enjoy seeing all the towns at night. But the fellow is far too reckless of a pilot. But they've deep pockets, you see, chap, so they can carry on as they please. That's why your lot must see strange lights that disappear so suddenly." When he finished, Murdoch found he could only laugh. "Oh dear," he said. "I think everyone's let the space age chatter get them all too far on edge, myself included." He added with a final chuckle, "I'm sorry, you two, but I really must get on with this train. Good night." And with a cheerful blast of his whistle, he puffed away into the night, this time without a worry in his smoke box. The next morning, he explained all about Harold and the new plane. The other engines were relieved, and in some cases rather embarrassed. After that, the subject of space quickly faded away, and from then on, the engines were more cautious of rumours. But for quite some time afterwards, whenever Murdoch would see a plane in the sky, he would have a quiet chuckle to himself, before blowing a cheerful whistle for any spaceships that might be nearby.
Pip and Emma had been purchased by the Fat Controller to run the railway's express service to London. The diesels were honoured and quickly proved their worth. The engines, however, were nervous. Gordon had always been the premier express engine, but with the arrival of the high-speed train, Gordon was finally retired from the express. The engines worried Gordon would be resentful, but the big engine stepped down with grace, and joined the others in warmly welcoming Pip and Emma to the family. Gordon, after being given a short, well-earned rest, began work pulling local trains. After so many years of hurrying about, he enjoyed the gentler pace. But although he projected an image of content, deep down he still felt a little disheartened. One evening he found himself alone in the sheds. Alone with his thoughts, he didn't notice Edward shuffle in. "Hello, Gordon," Edward called. The big engine jumped. "Edward! I didn't see you come in." Edward smiled. "I apologize if I startled you. You seemed rather forlorn. Is everything all right?" Yes, everything is fine, little Edward," said Gordon as loftily as he could. Edward gave a reassuring smile. I've known you a long time, Gordon, so I can tell if something is up. If you don't wish to share it, that's fine.
Oh, you're right, Edward, admitted Gordon. There's been a small something on my mind. It's just the Express, you see, he said, after a pause. It's not that I'm jealous or that I'm unhappy with Pip and Emma. I think they're doing a fine job, better than I can at this old age. But it's just... I just wish I could have one last run with it, you know? My last run was quite sudden. It would be nice to have had a proper send-off.
I know what you mean, comforted Edward. I'm sorry you feel that way.
Never mind, muttered Gordon. It'll pass, I'm sure.
With that, he retired to sleep, leaving Edward to ponder the situation. What neither engine had noticed was the quiet arrival of Pip and Emma. Oh, botheration, flounced Pip. I've never had luck with this silly cooling system. It was the next morning. Most of the engines had set off for work, but Pip wasn't feeling well. Whatever shall we do? Cried Pip as dramatically as she could. I'll never be able to work alone, cut in Emma woefully. I wasn't feeling quite right yesterday, so I don't know if I'll be able to manage. Whatever are we to do? Sighed Pip. The inspectors scratched their heads. The faults with the diesels couldn't have come at a worse time. We've got to do something, one muttered. The Express is due out soon. We'll never make it, moaned Emma. You'll have to get someone else. But who? Replied the inspector. Oh, why not Gordon? Said Emma innocently. Gordon was still on shed. His first train was due out for a while yet. The inspector hurried over to him. Gordon, do you think you could step in? We might be able to restore the old system just until we've a proper stand-in ready. Gordon was surprised, but excited.
I can certainly try, sir.
And so the arrangements were swiftly made, and Gordon was hastily readied for the Express. He was very excited and wanted to go to the station straight away. When at last he backed onto the train, he found the Fat Controller waiting for him. Thank you, Gordon, he said. You've saved us from an awkward predicament. You just need to get to the train to the end of the line, just as you always have. A high-speed train will take over from there. The passengers know they'll be delayed, so don't worry about being behind time.
Don't worry, sir. I'll get them there early, chortled Gordon. Just you wait and see.
The Fat Controller smiled and tipped his hat just as the guard's whistle blew. Gordon responded with gusto. Whistle blasting, wheels spinning, and the engine snorting, the Express swiftly drew out of the station.
Come along, come along, come along, called Gordon excitedly from the front.
Trickety-trot, sang the coaches from behind. With one last youthful cry of hurry, 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 Gordon and the Express rattled around the corner and out of sight. The Fat Controller watched until the train had long disappeared from view. By a fortunate stroke of luck, not long after Gordon had left the station, Pip and Emma found themselves feeling quite healthy once again. The Diesels felt rather pleased with themselves, but they had forgotten about the Fat Controller. I'm quite aware of what transpired this morning, and I do not approve of my engines feigning illness, he said to them. However, Edward has told me why you may have played such a game. Because of this, I am willing to turn a blind eye, just this once. So long as we have a firm understanding that this sort of thing is to never be repeated. The Diesels agreed wholeheartedly. Yes, sir. We are sorry, sir. Thank you, sir. They were waiting for their next train when Gordon trundled into sight. He felt worn out, but he couldn't look happier. Hello, Gordon, smiled Emma, who was at the front. Thank you for filling in for us. Did you have a good run?
Yes, indeed, beamed Gordon. It truly felt like a proper send-off. I couldn't have asked for a better run.
Excellent, smiled Pip. We're glad you enjoyed yourself.
Thank you, you two, Gordon added quietly with a wink. I'm not as naive as you may think. I appreciate the gesture, not to mention your service. I feel quite worn out after all that. I just don't have the energy anymore, so it's all the better you're here instead.
The three engines laughed happily, glad that the torch had finally been passed with style and grace.